wait. Waiting is full of expectation, waiting for the next moment to arrive. We miss this one. Don't wait. Dying folks taught me that. I was washing the back of one of our patients one day, a guy by the name of Joe, and as I was washing his back, he turned over his shoulder and he looked at me and he said, "I never thought it would be like this." I said, "What?" He said, "Dying." I said, "What did you think it would be like?" And he said, "I never thought about it." You see, in that moment, Joe's regret about never having reflected on his mortality, this was a greater cause of suffering for him than his terminal lung cancer. Death is the elephant in the room, right? It's the truth we all know but agree not to talk about. And we try to keep it at arm's length. We joke about it or project our worst fears onto it. We use euphemisms to keep ourselves safe. We sidestep the conversation or try to avoid it completely. We can run, but we cannot hide. There's a great old Babylonian myth about a merchant in Baghdad, and he sends his servant to the market. And a little while later, the servant comes back, really terrified and shaking with fear. And the merchant said, "What happened? What happened?" She said, "Well, I was in the market, and while I was in the market, this woman bumped into me, and when I turned around, I recognized her as Death. And she made this threatening gesture at me, and so I ran home here." He said, "Now give me your horse so I can ride away, and I can escape my fate, and I will ride to Samara tonight, and death will not find me." So the merchant gave him the horse, and off he rode in a fury. Then a little while later, the merchant went back to the marketplace as well, and he ran into Death as well. And he said, "Hey, why did you do that? Why did you scare my servant with that threatening gesture?" And Death said, "Oh, that wasn't a threatening gesture. That was just my look of surprise. I was surprised to see him here in Baghdad. I knew that I had an appointment with him tonight in Samara." I mean, to imagine that at the time of our dying, we will have the physical strength, the emotional stability, the mental clarity to do the work of a lifetime is a ridiculous gamble. Over the past 30 years, I've sat with a few thousand people on the precipice of death. And some of them came to their deaths full of disappointment, and others walked through that door full of wonder. And what seemed to really make the difference was the willingness to gradually live into what it means to be human. So today, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I can't tell you the 7 great steps that you need to a good death. But what I want to do is invite us to sit down with Death, to have a cup of tea with her, to get to know her really well, to listen carefully, and see what she can teach us about living a life of meaning and purpose. We can learn an awful lot about living fully by getting comfortable with sitting with Death. Death is the secret teacher hiding in plain sight. She's the one that shows us what matters most. And the good news is, we don't have to wait until the time of our dying to learn the lessons that she has to teach. Now, some of the people I work with, they lived in really terrible conditions. In rat-infested hotels, on the streets here by Glide Church, just around the block from here. They lived on park benches behind City Hall. They were alcoholics and prostitutes and homeless folks who barely survived on the margins of society. And many of them had lost all faith in any kind of system. And some of them were from cultures that I didn't know. And they were speaking languages that I couldn't understand. And some had this deep faith that carried them through difficult times. And others, they swore off religion years ago. There was this man, Nguyen, I remember, a Vietnamese man, and he was really afraid of ghosts. And his roommate, Isaiah, was an African-American man, and he was very comforted by nightly visits from his dead mother. Yeah. There was a man I worked with, a hemophiliac, who had contracted the HIV virus from a blood transfusion. But the year before, he had disowned his gay son when he announced to him that he was HIV positive. And now, father and son were in twin beds in the same room, being cared for by Agnes, the father's wife and the son's mother. For some of the folks that I work with, dying was a great gift, and they made reconciliations with long-lost families, and they found forgiveness and the kindness they'd been looking for their whole lives. And other folks, they turned toward the wall in withdrawal and hopelessness and depression, and they never came back again. All of them were my teachers. Now in Zen we say, when your teachers are in the room, it keeps you honest. So I brought my teachers with me today, and in just a moment, I'm going to ask our friends backstage to project photos of these people onto the screens. And these photos are not my deck, you know. This is not a video that we watch passively. These are people inviting you in to learn from what they encountered. So the images will rotate and we'll watch. And as you look at the photos, I want to encourage you to do one simple thing, which is to look at them with some degree of self-awareness, to check out what's happening in your body, your heart, and your mind. And then to look at two specific things. What attracts you to the photo and what causes you to pull away. What attracts you and what causes you to pull away. It's important to see both. No need to analyze, no need to do anything except sense. Look and see who they remind you of. See if you can see yourself in them. See if you can see them in you. So they'll teach, and I'll translate. So can we put up these slides now? You know, the habits of our life, they have a really powerful momentum, and they propel us right into the moment of our dying. So the question that arises, of course, is what habits do we want to create? I mean, suppose we stop compartmentalizing death, cutting it off from life. Imagine if we regarded dying as the final stage of growth, as an unprecedented opportunity for transformation. Could we then turn to death as a master teacher and say, how then shall we live? Without a reminder of death, we tend to take this life for granted. But when we keep death at our fingertips, really close at hand, you know, I think what happens is we don't hold on so tightly. I think we take ourselves and our ideas and beliefs a little less seriously. And when we recognize that death comes to all of us, then we realize we're all in the boat together. And I think this engenders a certain kindness and gentleness toward one another. You know, in this culture, we still think about dying as a medical event. It's predominantly a medical event. But the experience of dying, it's too profound to be left to medicine. And when we speak of dying as just making the best of a bad situation, we're robbing it of its holy significance. The dying experience can teach us much more than that. Dying is inevitable and intimate. I've seen ordinary people like you and I, develop profound insights that have them emerging as something bigger and larger and more expansive than the small separate self they've taken themselves to be. This isn't a fairy tale happy ending. This regularly happens for people at the end of life. It happens in the final months, days, sometimes even the last few minutes. Too late, you might say, and I would tend to agree. Too late. But here's the thing. It's not how long they enjoyed that experience. It's that that possibility for transformation exists. And if it exists at the time of dying, then it exists now. We can harness the awareness of death to appreciate the fact that we're alive, to encourage self-exploration, to clarify our values, to find meaning, to generate real purpose in the world. And what becomes undeniable when you're with people who are dying is that fragility and impermanence are in the nature of life. It's always coming together and falling apart, and not just at the time of dying. And it's possible to hold it all with compassion and love. It's life's uncertainty that gives us perspective, isn't it? I mean, when we come into contact with just how precarious this life is, then we also touch how precious it is. And then we don't want to waste a minute. Then we want to enter our lives fully and use them in responsible ways. Don't wait. It's a pathway to fulfillment and an antidote to regret. You know, embracing the truth that inevitably everything must end, it encourages us not to wait, to begin living each moment in a way that's deeply engaged. And so we stop wasting our lives on meaningless activities. And instead of pinning our hopes on the future, we focus on the present and we get grateful for what's here, right now. You know, mostly we think about death as later. And later gives us this comfortable distance. But later, constant change, you know, it's not later. It's here and now. And impermanence is that essential truth that's woven into the very fabric of our life, and it's our constant companion. You know, where is this morning's breakfast? You know, where is last night's lovemaking? Where is my childhood? Could someone please tell me where my blonde hair has gone to? Intellectually, we may understand that our mother's treasured vase will one day fall from the shelf, that our car will break down, that the people we love will die. Our work is to move the understanding from our intellect and to allow it to nestle deeply in our hearts. Impermanence isn't the cause of suffering. We actually rely on change. We rely on impermanence. That cold you have today, eventually it'll go away. That really boring dinner party that you're going to go to tonight, you know, it will come to an end, you know. Evil dictatorships will crumble. Presidential terms end. You know, even trees burn in the forest, you know, to make room for new ones. Without impermanence, life simply couldn't be. Without impermanence, your son, you know, couldn't take his first steps. Your daughter couldn't grow up to be a scientist. Impermanence is humbling. It's absolutely certain, and yet the way it will manifest is completely unpredictable. You know, it's funny to me that we all agree that everything is constantly changing, that life's in flux, you know. Seasons come and go, trends peak. Yet we prefer to cling to the illusion that we are a solid thing moving through a changing world. You know? Everything is changing except me, right? I'm the one thing that's not changing. But we're mistaken. You know, we're not the accountant or the barista or the software engineer or the CEO. We're not even really the person listening to this talk, at least not as we usually imagine it. We're in flux. We are, like everything else, at once here and disappearing. You know, in a few weeks, I'm going to go with my friend Joan Halifax to Japan, and we'll take in these beautiful cherry blossoms that cover the hillsides. And there's this cabin I teach at in Ohio, and outside the cabin, there are these little tiny blue flax flowers that live for one day. Tell me, why are those cherry blossoms and those blue flax flowers so much more magnificent than plastic flowers. I mean, isn't it the fact that their brevity and their fragility calls us into their beauty and it engages us in a sense of wonder and gratitude? Death is not a stranger to us. It's always announcing itself. This moment of life you're living right now, it will come to an end. And you don't know how many more moments you have. And no matter how much you accomplish and how many times you do something, there will come a time when you do it for the last time. You have this one extraordinary opportunity to fall in love with existence. So why not relax and enjoy your life? Really relax, even in the midst of hard work and difficulties and beauty. You know, a few years ago, I was teaching a program and I had a heart attack. And I went into the hospital in urgent surgery and triple bypass surgery, a big deal. They cut you open and split you wide like a crab, you know. And it took lots of months to recover. I've taken care of a lot of people who die. But I have to tell you that the view from the other side of the sheets is a really different one. Death makes life real. Death makes life real. You know, while I was recovering, this really famous Tibetan teacher, he called me up and to sort of cheer me along, and I knew he'd also had a heart condition, so I asked him, how'd you deal with it? You know, all the drama and the depression and the beauty and pain. And I waited for a little while, and just on the other side of there was this pause on the other end of the line, and he said, well, I think it was good to have a heart. And he said, if you have a heart, you should expect it will have problems. And then he hung up. I thought he was going to give me some esoteric practice. But you know, he was right. I realized afterwards he was right, you know. If we have a human existence, if we have a human body, we should expect it will have problems. Yeah. You know, there's this phenomenon that happens when people are newly diagnosed with cancer and other life-threatening illnesses. They don't talk about it too much with everybody, but they've spoken about it with me. And they talk about a secret gratitude that life-threatening illness has given them. That they realize that now they can say no. They can say no to people or activities or things that they don't want to do anymore, that aren't meaningful to them. They always felt obliged to say yes, but now they say to me, now I can finally rest. There was this woman in our hospice. Her name was Adele. She was an 86-year-old Russian Jewish lady, tough as nails. And the night she was dying, they called me up, and I came in to be with her, and I walked in the room. I sat on the couch and watched as Adele sat on the bed with her feet dangling off the end of the bed in her nightgown, and this really great home health aide was with her. And she turned to Adele in a loving way, and she said, you know, Adele, you don't have to be frightened. We're right here with you. And Adele looked at her, and she said, honey, if this was happening to you, you'd be frightened. So I stayed in the corner, yeah. And then a little while later, this wonderful attendant said, Adele, you look a little cold. Would you like a blanket? And Adele shot back, of course I'm cold. I'm almost dead. So I saw two things when I was watching this. One was that Adele was struggling. She was really struggling hard. You know, there's a labor to dying, just like there's a labor to getting born. And in her case, the struggle was in the breath. Every in-breath is struggle, every out-breath is struggle. And the second thing was that she didn't want to talk about any nonsense. She didn't want to talk about tunnels of light. She just wanted honest, real, authentic relationship. So I pulled my chair up really close to her. I knew her for some months, and so I could be honest with her. And I said, Adele, would you like to struggle a little less? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, I noticed something. I noticed something right there at the end of your exhale. I noticed this little pause before the next inhale. And I wonder if you could put your attention there, just for a few minutes. I'll do it with you. Now, this is an 86-year-old Russian Jewish lady. She doesn't care beans about Buddhism or mindfulness meditation or any of these things, but she's highly motivated in this moment to be free of suffering. As we would breathe in and breathe out, you could watch the fear in her face drain away as she found a place of rest in that gap. And then she said, I think I'll rest now. And she leaned back on her pillow, and a little while later, she died very peacefully. Don't wait. Don't wait. Do we need to die before we can rest in peace? Look, the questions, the big questions that people ask at the end of their life, they aren't about what they've accumulated or what they regretted not doing. There's lots of books about that, but that isn't really what happens. What really people want to know at the end of their life are two things. Am I loved? And did I love well? Am I loved and did I love well? To be human, to be a human in this life is much more than getting born and getting an education and finding the right partner and a pretty house on a nice street and then going to sleep and waking up in the morning and going to work and doing it all over again. It's an invitation to feel everything, to come into direct contact with this strange, beautiful, horrible, and often perfectly ordinary thing we call life. It's an opportunity to be conscious of the fact that some of us will make love while others make war. To recognize the truth that there are babies like my granddaughter who are born into loving arms and whose mother caresses her every day and kisses her bright future into her cheeks. And there are babies like Carolyn, who I knew, whose mother left her in a dumpster. It's to recognize the fact that, and to embrace the fact of night screams in Syrian refugee camps, and the fact that there are children who are making tents out of couch pillows and bed sheets. There is devastation, and there is hopelessness, and there is the passion and the holy commitment to create a better future for all of us. There is me speaking, and you listening, and the separation between us. And there is the unity we feel almost immediately when we're reminded that there is love. Don't wait. Dying folks taught me that. Thank you very much.